What's up, guys? It is Sam here, and it's good to see you. We have an awesome show for you today. One of the things that has been on a lot of people's minds over the last year is inflation. And in the news, it's reported that the price is going up, right? Assets or gas prices are going up. Bread goes up, meat goes up, chicken, eggs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right. However, it's a little bit different like this. I've talked about this in some other episodes, but today I actually have an awesome little treat. This is Mike Maloney, and he put together this entire thing about the history or the history and secrets of money. And part number 4, we're going to be going through in this episode because I think it would be extremely, extremely valuable. What's up to the chat? Thank you for being here. And I'll see you guys in a minute and a second.
You already know what time it is. Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning. Waiting on phone. Crypto in the morning. 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 Waiting on phone. Crypto in the morning. Crypto in the morning. Smoking a blunt on my way to the gym. 11 a.m. and I'm already tuned in. Got me some hacks and I'm making a stake. Got me some heads on, I'm making it rain. Pay me some maxi and that's just in case. Jim ready sent me to show you the way. Crypto in the morning. 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 Crypto in the morning.
So let's understand what the definition, according to Google, is for inflation. And then we will get into what Mike Maloney has to say about inflation. What inflation actually is, here we go, we're going to pull up Google here. So according to Google, inflation is the action of inflating something or the conditioning of being inflated. In economics, a general increase in prices and a fall in the purchasing value of money. Okay, so this definition here, I think is very commonly misunderstood. It is not that prices are going up. And that might be counterintuitive to what you believe or what you've been told for years. It is the value of the thing that is denominating prices going down. And in the crypto space, you should be able to understand this more acutely than a lot of other people. If somebody were to inflate Bitcoin at 16x the rate it is currently inflating, and then next year do 160x the rate they're inflating, the price of Bitcoin relative to something else would decrease, right? Relative to, say, Ethereum, that would decrease, right? If the number of tokens of Bitcoin were able to, say, in 2022, there was 10,000 or 175,000 new tokens. And say in 2023, that went to 1.7 million tokens. And then in 2024, that was 17.5 million tokens, right? And the inflation was like working in that manner, similar to how our currency actually is. The price of Bitcoin relative to other things would be Bitcoin relative to, say, as a ratio to Ethereum. Ethereum would looks like it's going up in price, right? But in reality, it's Bitcoin going down in price because of the inflation. Well, that's the same idea, except for everybody has a point of view of looking at prices in terms of USD value. So when you look at things in terms of USD value, when the US dollar inflates, and not just 10x in a year, but trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars in a year, right? And it's happened a lot over the last 24 months. What happens to prices? Well, in terms of how we relate that back to the example, everything else looks more expensive because the dollar is becoming more worth less. And that is the essence of what inflation is. And Mike Maloney does a good job of explaining it. So we're going to get into this video.
You are about to learn one of the biggest secrets in the history of the world. It's a secret that has huge effects for everyone who lives on this planet. Most people can feel deep down that something isn't quite right with the world economy, but few know what it is. Gone are the days where a family can survive on just one paycheck. Every day it seems things are more and more out of control, yet only 1 in a million understand why. You are about to discover the system that is ultimately responsible for most of the inequality in our world today. The powers that be do not want you to know about this.
So on the topic of inflation, I can use inflation to rob people, right? Because if I could just print myself billions of dollars, you peasants of the world will sell your time and energy. Time is the only resource, right? Time, you will sell your time and freedom to get more worthless dollars that I control. So the essence of inflation in fiat is stealing from the poor people to give to the government more power and to give to bankers more power. I just want to highlight that there.
As this system is what has kept them at the top of the financial food chain for the last 100 years. Learning this will change your life because it'll change the choices that you make. If enough people learn it, it'll change the world because it'll change the system. For this is the biggest hidden secret of money. Never in human history have so many been plundered by so few, and it's all accomplished through.
This is also a kind of like a docu-series with like 10 different parts. If you want to watch this, you can look up Mike Maloney, The Hidden Secrets of Money on YouTube, and listen to it while you're driving. Each part's around 30 minutes long. It's also very good if you want to understand a little bit more of how the economic systems around the world work, as if you think of it as like the Federal Reserve replaced with like the German Federal Reserve, the UK Federal Reserve, because not all systems are this way. They're based on a usury type of a system, charging interest. But let's get into it.
This, the biggest scam in the history of mankind.
They say that money doesn't grow on trees, but the truth is that the modern banking system creates currency far faster than trees can grow. Most people don't have a clue how currency is created. Economists and bankers make it sound so complex that people think they can't understand it. But I'm going to strip our monetary system down to its essence so that you can see the scam behind the curtain and just how it affects you. Every modern society creates currency in pretty much the same way. But since the US dollar is the majority of the world's currency, I'm going to use the United States as our example. It all starts when some politician says, "Vote for me and I'll make sure the government provides you more free stuff than my opponent will." But there's no such thing as a free lunch. So to provide that supposedly free stuff, the politicians vote for the country to spend more than its income. This is called deficit spending. To pay for that deficit spending, the Treasury borrows currency by issuing a bond. So what's a bond? If you think about it, a bond is really nothing but a glorified IOU. It's a pretty piece of paper with numbers printed on it that says, "Loan me $1 trillion today, and I promise over a 10-year period, I'm going to pay you back that $1 trillion plus interest." But what you need to understand is that Treasury bonds are our national debt. These glorified IOUs are to be paid back by you and I and our descendants through future taxation. Therefore, when the government issues a bond, it steals prosperity out of the future so that it can spend it today. The Treasury then...
If you're not aware of this, the national debt in the United States, this is what he's talking about, right, is $31.12 trillion. $31 trillion. This is going to collapse some point relatively soon.
holds a bond auction, and the world's largest banks show up and compete to buy part of our national debt and make a profit on it by earning interest. You'll notice that as we move through this process, the big banks are there, taking a cut every step of the way. This isn't by chance, as you'll see shortly. Then, through a shell game called open market operations, the banks get to sell some of those bonds to the Federal Reserve at a profit. To pay for the bonds, the Federal Reserve opens up its big old checkbook and writes bad, bogus, counterfeit checks that should bounce because they're drawn on an account that always has a zero balance. There isn't one penny in there. To quote from the Boston Federal Reserve, when you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover that check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money.
This might sound like crazy to you, or that like, how is this possible? This is actually how it works. You're like, this is a big scam. Yes, this is true. That is an accurate statement. That's how it actually works. Let's get back into this.
The Fed then hands those checks to the banks, and at this point,
why is that? I got my highlight. There we go.
Currency springs into existence. The banks then take that currency and buy more bonds at the next Treasury auction. But what is a check? A check is also an IOU. When you write a check, you're making a note that says, here's my IOU for cash. All you have to do is go to the bank and pick it up. Now, it's very, very important that you understand this process, because we're going to come back later and show you the devastating effect this has on you. The Treasury issues IOUs, bonds. The banks then buy those IOUs with currency. The Federal Reserve then writes IOUs, checks, and hands them to the banks in exchange for the Treasury's IOUs, the bonds. And currency is created. So what's really happening is the Federal Reserve and the Treasury are just swapping IOUs, using the banks as middlemen, and abracadabra, presto, currency magically springs into existence. This process repeats and repeats over and over again, enriching the banks and indebting the public by raising the national debt. The end result is that there's a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury. This process is also where all paper currency comes from. The Federal Reserve and the government mistakenly call it base money because they didn't watch episode 1 of this series, and they don't know the difference between money and currency. But I will correctly refer to it as base currency because it is not money. It is currency, and as we've learned, there is a big difference. Money has to be a store of value and maintain its purchasing power.
He defines money differently than how traditional, slightly different, where you think of money as a exchange of value, you think of money as a store of value, and there's one other thing that I'm not remembering. What is this? What is define money, right? Current medium of exchange in the form of coins, banknotes, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so a medium of exchange and a store of value is how a lot of people define money. Well, he defines it as currency is a medium of exchange, while money is a store of value. So they're two separate things, especially when you think about like fake money, like fiat, right? Like it's crazy. It's crazy how much time people will sell of their life for made up shit. It's like, hey guys, I just came up with something. It's called Sam's. What do you make of your job? $50,000? I'll pay you 100,000 Sam's. Will you come work for me and sell me your time and energy and freedom for this made up thing that I just created. And so many people do that in their whole entire life.
Power over long periods of time. We learned in episode 1 that earlier in our history, our paper currency was just a claim check. It was a representation for real money of intrinsic value, the gold and silver that was held on deposit at the Treasury. You could walk into any bank and slap your currency, like say a $20 bill, on the counter and redeem it for real money, a $20 gold piece. But now, this base currency that's piling up back here is really nothing but a receipt or a claim check on an IOU, that bond. So it's really nothing but a supply of numbers. The Treasury then deposits the newly created currency into the various branches of the government, and the politicians say, hey, thanks for that. And the government does some deficit spending on public works, social programs, and war. The government employees, contractors, and soldiers then deposit their pay in the banks. Now, this may come as a shock to you, but when you deposit your currency with the bank, you're not actually depositing it into an account to be safely held in trust for you. Instead, you're actually loaning the bank your currency, and within certain legal limits, they can do with it pretty much anything they please. This includes gambling in the stock market and loaning it out, at a profit, of course. Now this is where the machine of currency creation really gets cranking, because this is where something called fractional reserve lending comes into play. Fractional reserve lending is exactly what it says. The banks are allowed to reserve only a fraction of your deposit and loan the rest out. Although reserve ratios may vary, I'm going to use a 10% reserve ratio as our example. If you deposit $100 in your account, the bank can legally take $90 of it and loan it out without telling you. The bank must hold $10 of your deposit in reserve just in case you want some of it. These reserves are called vault cash. But why does your bank account still say you have $100 if the bank has stolen $90 of it? Because the bank left IOUs it created, called bank credit, in its place. Now, I know this sounds crazy, but here it is in black and white from the Fed. Commercial banks create checkbook money when they grant a loan simply by adding new deposit dollars in accounts on their books in exchange for a borrower's IOU. These are nothing but numbers that the banks type into their computers. And even though these bank credit IOU numbers are very different from base currency numbers, because they only exist in computers, they are still currency. So now there is $190 in existence. Now, the reason people take out loans from the banks is to buy something. They're going to buy a house or a car or something like that. So the borrower takes the $90 that the bank loaned to him from your account, and he pays the seller of the item. But then the seller deposits that currency into his account, and his bank loans out 90% of that and leaves bank credit numbers in its place. So now there's $271 in existence. This process repeats and repeats until under a 10% reserve ratio, an initial deposit of just $100 can create up to $1,000 of bank credit, all backed by $100 of vault cash, just 10%. But as I said, reserve ratios vary wildly.
You're starting to get like the picture. Are you starting to understand like the system will collapse? There's not one example in history of this usury type of system ever succeeding. Any fiat currency designed this way, there's never been one example in all of history of this working. Do you understand now? Are you starting to get the picture? This is going to collapse, and you need to position yourself appropriately. Educate yourself.
On some deposits, it's 10%. On others, it's 3%. And on some forms of deposits, reserve requirements are 0. The result is that the expansion of the currency supply by the banks is far greater than even this example would lead you to believe. So once again, when currency is deposited in the banks get to lend it out, and then it gets redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent, redeposited and relent over and over again, creating bank credit all the way. This is where the vast majority of our currency supply comes from. In fact, 92 to 96% of all currency in existence is created not by the government, but here in the banking system. Now, massive amounts of currency spewing into society may at first sound like a fun idea. That is, until you remember one of the most important hidden secrets of money from episode 1, that the prices of everyday goods and services act as a sponge on an expanding currency supply. The more currency we have, the more prices rise. This is where inflation comes from. The true definition of inflation is an expansion of the currency supply. Rising prices are merely the symptom. So our entire currency supply is nothing but a couple of bucks whipped up in this hocus-pocus scam where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve swap glorified IOUs, and a bunch of numbers that the banks just type into their computers. That's it. That's our entire currency supply. It's nothing but a supply of numbers. Some of them printed, most of them typed, and there is nothing else. But if you thought that was crazy, get ready to enter the twilight zone of modern economics. We work for some of that currency supply. True wealth is your time, but we trade away moments of our lives, hour by hour, day by day, and year by year, for numbers that somebody printed on pieces of paper or just typed into a computer. Now those numbers represent our blood, sweat, tears, labor, ideas, and talent. We are what gives the currency its value.
I'm gonna replay that again. If you're working and you're trading your time for fake currency, right? Then you may want to rethink potentially how you're living your life. And you might not see a road out. You might not see a solution. But knowledge, and then applying that knowledge, you will get there. You can get out. You can get out of that system. You can do it a different way. But nobody can do it for you. You have to take responsibility to do it for yourself. System that makes you money and is not tied to your time, right? If you say money, in this case, that's a store of value in terms of how he defines it, right? So currency, right? Get you currency that you can go then again buy things that have actual value. Remember, currency doesn't have any value. It's a medium of exchange. So it's the road you travel on. It's not like the valuable shit that you actually drive on the road. Like you don't have the road is what you drive the Lamborghinis on and everything like that, right? And if you're trading your time for money and if you love it, great. But if you want more, if you desire more, if you want to take care of the people that you love and care about, you want to see a bigger future for yourself. Maybe you want to drive a McLaren or Lamborghini or something. You don't get a second chance at this thing, guy. Like, take fucking responsibility and start doing something about it. You can do it. But you need to start. You need to start. So I just rewinded this a little bit to get back in here.
Economics. We work for some of that currency supply. True wealth is your time, but we trade away moments of our lives, hour by hour, day by day, and year by year, for numbers that somebody printed on pieces of paper or just typed into a computer. Now those numbers represent our blood, sweat, tears, labor, ideas, and talent. We are what gives the currency its value. But here comes the really cruel joke. We work hard so that we can save some of that currency, so that we can pay the tax collector in the United States, it's known as the IRS. They then turn it over to the Treasury so that the Treasury can pay the principal plus interest on that bond that the Federal Reserve bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. Now let's do a recap on this section, because this is where the system begins to rob you and I on a massive scale. Much of our taxes are not used for schools, roads, and public services, but to pay interest on bonds that the Federal Reserve bought with a check drawn on an account that has nothing in it. The Federal Reserve is committing fraud. But here's one of the biggest secrets of them all. Before the establishment of the Federal Reserve, there was no need for personal income tax. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and that very same year, the Constitution was amended to allow income tax. Do you really think this was just a coincidence? Ask yourself.
Listen to that again, guys. Listen to this again. This is all actual information. It's just you're not educated on this stuff. It goes back a little bit more.
Before the establishment of the Federal Reserve, there was no need for personal income tax. The Federal Reserve was created in 1913, and that very same year, the Constitution was amended to allow income tax. Do you really think this was just a coincidence?
If you are in charge of the money, you rule everything, right? So if you're in charge of the money and you can implement a usury system, as in this right here, and now in order to pay that credit card bill, that's effectively what it is, I need to take the money from something. So I'm going to take it from all you little peasants to sell your time for money, right? And that is when this came out. Isn't it kind of interesting? I also just read a book on the history of Federal Reserves globally, and this same type of shit happening all around the world. By the way, $31 trillion, right, is the national debt now here in the United States. If you assume that the interest rate on that is 1%, just 1%, what does that mean? You have $310 billion in interest. In interest only. No principal pay down, no reducing that debt, just in interest. Right? But we all know the government has zero intention of actually solving any problems or doing anything productive.
Ask yourself how much income tax you've paid over your lifetime. Much of it has been silently siphoned away into the hands of those who own the system. Yes, this system has owners. Who they are is an even bigger secret that we'll get to shortly. But first, we need to understand the mumbo-jumbo of the so-called debt ceiling. It's all based on a huge paradox. There was interest due on that bond, and there was interest due on every one of those loans that the banks made. That means that there is interest due on every dollar in existence. Let me ask you something. If you borrow the very first dollar into existence, and that's the only dollar that exists on the planet, but you promise to pay it back plus another dollar's worth of interest, where do you get the second dollar to pay the interest? The answer is that you have to borrow that one into existence and promise to pay it back with interest as well. So now there are $2 in existence, but you owe $4, and so on and so on. The result is there's never enough currency to pay the debt. There is always more debt.
So in reading like anybody with any modicum of, for people with small brains, that's a small amount of common sense, understands this is not sustainable, right? And there's a book, the history of, I have it back there actually, history of federal banks globally, right? I think Napoleon and Russia implemented a different system. And in that book, they talk about how the bankers, how the financiers, how the people in charge of the money in the other countries purposely did things to cause war and used the fake money printing to stop it, right? So if the government just said, hey, this is how much currency there is out there, and they controlled it, and it wasn't based on all debt, you could create a different type of system, right? That's effectively what that book was kind of like getting into. But like anybody can tell that this system here is not sustainable even in the slightest.
In the system, then there is currency in existence to pay the debt. Therefore, the whole system is impossible. It is finite. It will come to an end one day. What would happen if the government stopped borrowing to do deficit spending? Are the payments on those treasury bonds going to stop? What would happen if the public stopped borrowing and going deeper into debt? Are your house and car payments going to stop? No. There is a payment due every month on the principal plus the interest on every dollar in existence, and those payments do not stop. If we stop borrowing, then no new currency is created to replace the currency that we used to make those payments. Whether you're making a payment on a loan or paying tax to make a payment on a bond, the portion of the payment that goes to pay off the principal extinguishes that portion of the debt. But the debt also extinguishes the currency. Currency and debt are like matter and antimatter. When they meet, they annihilate each other. If we just pay off the principal only on all the loans and bonds that exist, the entire currency supply just vanishes. So if we don't go deeper into debt every year, look what happens. The whole thing goes into a deflationary collapse under the weight of those payments. Politicians and pundits alike talk about balancing the budget, paying down the debt, and living within our means. They don't understand that that is deflationary. It is impossible to do under our current monetary system without collapsing the whole economy. This is why any talk of a debt ceiling is not only ridiculous.
Imagine prices actually getting cheaper because the currency you held is going up in value. Crypto comes to mind.
It's delusional. The system is designed to require ever-increasing levels of debt just to continue. And that's why politicians will always kick the can down the road and raise this so-called debt ceiling over and over again until the whole system finally collapses under its own weight. In other words, they don't want it to collapse on their watch. The founding fathers of the United States knew the dangers of central banking and fought to free themselves from this very thing. The Revolutionary War started out as a tax revolt, but now we must pay tax just to have a monetary system. Having just suffered through the hyperinflation of the continental dollar, which was printed into oblivion to finance the Revolutionary War, they understood the dangers of fiat currency and debt-based monetary systems. So to protect future generations from institutional theft and out-of-control government, they wrote into the Constitution that only gold and silver can be money for the simple fact that you can't print them. Our current system is not...
And then they changed the Constitution. They changed it after the Federal Reserve.
Not only unconstitutional, but it robs us of the liberty and prosperity our forefathers fought and died for. We are all feeling the effects of ignoring the Constitution right now. By forcing more currency into circulation, our purchasing power is diluted. Inflation is a slow and insidious stealth tax that is simply the result of this debt-based monetary system. This system empowers and benefits those who create the currency and receive it first, as they get to spend it into circulation before it has an effect on the economy. They're stealing purchasing power from you and transferring it to the banks and the government every hour of every day because of this false monetary system. And it's not like the people at the top don't know this. To quote the Federal Reserve, the decrease in purchasing power incurred by the holders of money due to inflation imparts gains to the issuers of money. This is a fraud. It is a pyramid scheme, it is a Ponzi scheme, it's a scam, and it's a lie. Our entire monetary system is nothing but a form of legalized theft. But here's the biggest con job of them all. The Federal Reserve is not federal, it has stockholders. There is no federal agency that has stockholders. What's a stockholder? A share of stock represents a percentage of ownership in a corporation. So the stockholders are the owners of that corporation. Therefore, the Federal Reserve is a private corporation with owners. And you can see it for yourself if you go to the Federal Reserve's website, and it will say, the stockholders receive an annual dividend of 6%. Now, we know that the stock in the Federal Reserve was originally issued to the largest banks in the United States. But because of mergers and acquisitions through the years, you can't actually trace who owns the stock in the Federal Reserve. That's a very closely guarded secret. My guess would be that the owners are those primary dealers, the banks that get to make a profit by selling part of our national debt, those bonds, to the Federal Reserve, who buys them with a check from nothing. Then we pay tax to pay the principal and the interest on those bonds so that the Federal Reserve can pay the banks a 6% dividend. Don't be alarmed if you don't quite comprehend the deception of this system at first glance. Very few people do. It is purposely complex. The economist John Maynard Keynes once wrote, By this means, government may secretly and unobserved confiscate the wealth of the people, and not one man in a million will detect the theft. I believe that presented correctly, anyone can understand this system, regardless of how complex it is. So let's do a recap and break it down even more. The way the system works is that, step 1, the government creates glorified IOUs. These bonds increase our national debt and put the public on the hook to pay it back. Step 2, IOUs are swapped to create currency. The Treasury sells the bonds to the banks. The banks then turn around and sell our national debt at a profit to the Federal Reserve, which they probably own. The Federal Reserve then opens its checkbook that doesn't have a penny in it and buys those IOUs with IOUs that it writes, checks, on a checking account that has a zero balance. Then they give those checks to the banks and currency just springs into existence. And then the whole process repeats. This results in a buildup of bonds at the Federal Reserve and currency at the Treasury, which is really just a supply of numbers. The Treasury then deposits the numbers in the various branches of the government, and we get to step 3. The government spends the numbers on promises, public works, social programs, and war. Then the government employees, contractors, and soldiers deposit their pay into the banks, and we get to step 4, where the banks multiply the numbers by magically inventing more IOUs through fractional reserve lending, where they steal a portion of everyone's deposit and lend it out. That currency gets redeposited, and then a portion is stolen again. And the process repeats over and over, magnifying the currency supply exponentially. Then we work for some of those numbers, which brings us to step 5, where our numbers are taxed. We pay tax to the IRS, who then turns our numbers over to the Treasury, so the Treasury can pay the principal plus the interest on bonds that were purchased by the Federal Reserve with a check from nothing. Then we get to step 6, the debt ceiling delusion. The system is designed to require ever-increasing levels of debt and will eventually collapse under its own weight because politicians always kick the can down the road. They don't want it to collapse on their watch. And finally, step 7, the secret owners take their cut. The world's largest banks own the Federal Reserve. Those banks make a profit selling our national debt to the Fed. They make a profit when the Fed pays them interest on the reserves held at the Fed, and the Fed pays them a 6% dividend on their ownership of the Fed. This system is fundamentally evil. It funnels wealth from the working population to the government and the banking sector. It is the cause of the artificial booms and busts of modern economies, and it causes great disparity of wealth between the rich and the working class. And it is only possible because we no longer use real money, we use currency. But worst of all, it is a form of enslavement. Bond is the root word of bondage. Whenever a government issues a bond, it is a promise to make us pay tax in the future. Nobody asked you if you wanted to pay tax today for the...
What do you think? Is this enlightening to you? Are you opening your mind to thinking differently about how things are done? Right? What is this the first time you've understood how inflation works, how the system works? Let me know in the chat. I'm curious to hear what you guys think.
The prosperity we all enjoyed in the last century? Nobody is asking our children if they want to work hard in the future to pay for the prosperity we're enjoying now. George Washington once wrote to James Madison, "No generation has the right to contract debts greater than can be paid off during the course of its own existence."
What a novel idea. What a novel idea, right? Like to not create more debts that you can pay off in your existence. Only more people in our government actually thought that way, right?
By stealing prosperity from tomorrow so we can spend it today, we enslave ourselves and future generations. Now, this all sounds pretty bad, but there is great hope, for you are the greatest threat to this false monetary system. This system relies on the public being ignorant of its workings. Please share this knowledge with everyone you know, because an informed public that fully understands the system can build a better future for generations to come. And now I leave you with this quote, widely attributed to a former director of the Bank of England. The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astounding piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Banking was conceived in inequity and born in sin. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again.
I want to read through that again. Banking was conceived in inequity and born in sin. Bankers own the world. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money and control credit. And with the flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. As you go through and continue the education in your life, you understand that this is how the system has been built. It's been built like this in past history in other nations around the world. It has always failed. Be prepared. Start thinking about what you need to do. Continue to educate yourself and start thinking about what you need to do to get out of the system. And then I'm gonna talk about what I'm personally doing.
Credit, and with the flick of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. But if you want to continue as the slaves of bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, let them continue to create money and to control credit. This is the Federal Reserve in Washington, D.C. It's located on Constitution Street, and that is just as much of a joke as the New York Fed being located on Liberty Street. Both of them are unconstitutional, both of them limit our liberty, and they transfer wealth away from us every second of every day to the Federal Reserve, to the government, and to the banking sector. You are now among the 1 in a million who can detect the theft of your prosperity. So the big question is, what can you do about it? 1. Watch this video until you can describe and teach it to others. Those who understand this system can make preparations for its unavoidable collapse and protect themselves. History shows that those who don't will probably be wiped out. 2. Share this video with everyone, especially those you can.
So I believe he gets into he's bullish on gold and silver, right? And so that holds a lot of his portfolio. But you know what else is in his portfolio? And this is the series. I'm up to like maybe episode 10 or something in this series as I work on other shit. And he has Bitcoin and other cryptos in his portfolio, right? Now, what are you going to do about this? Like, how are you going to save yourself, right? Like, do you have $100,000? I know people, like I used to work in banking, and there'd be people with $1 million of cash just sitting in the bank. Why? Right? I don't know, and they weren't getting that much flow. They weren't getting like $1 million a month of flow coming into their account. They were just literally letting money just sit there. Like, and you're like, what are you doing? Buy something that goes up in value. Buy something that generates more cash for you, or whatever the case is, or they'll retain its value. So what are some things that I think are going to retain value as the system collapses? Well, you think of like a hard asset, right? Like real estate. But the only thing about real estate is it's all based on debt here in the United States. So as the system collapses, it's going to have to switch to something else. And if we see deflation, then prices are going to be coming down, right? Because that system is going to go away. There's going to have to be another system in place. And when will this happen? I'm not sure. But if you follow crypto, if you're watching this right now, you probably understand that crypto is going to be the future. Right, 3.5% of the global population is in crypto as of January 2021. We're in January of 2023, right? So when the numbers come out for 2022, that I believe is going to be in 4.5% on the low side and up to maybe 7% on the high side for the number of people in crypto as an estimate. And the faster this drains, the fiat is sucked out. It's like a giant bathtub of just fake money, right? And it's going down the drain. And that drain is leading to like the salvation of a lot of people, giving them their sovereignty with crypto, right? So for me, I like hard assets. Like I like real estate, but I'm not sure how that's going to play out. Like I don't know. What do you think? Like how is this going to play out? The whole system for housing in the United States is all based on credit. Does that mean going into other places? I think that's a great strategy. I do plan on picking up real estate in other countries around the world, not in anything related to the EU, more so developing countries, because that's where people are going to want to go, and those are going to be some of the places that are really growing. I like businesses. Right? Like I like owning businesses because those are, if you can own a business, right? Like if you own a business and I buy part of your business from you, and it's like something that you love to do or whatever the case is, as your business, and I can buy part of that with fake currency, right? Just made up currency, and I'll buy some of that from you, then I'm able to buy your time and your energy. You might love doing that, right? Like you might like continue doing it, and maybe it's valuable to you to receive $50,000 for 30, 40, whatever percent of your company. And then I get a check or I get a wire of money just coming into my account from that. So I like those. I like businesses. I love crypto. I love crypto as a total asset class. I also wouldn't be opposed to owning some gold. I wouldn't be opposed to owning some gold. It would probably be a tiny fraction of like the total portfolio. We should do a video on portfolio theory. If you want to see a video on like portfolio theory, like how efficient markets work and that kind of thing, there's a lot of data around that stuff, and we can poke holes in it, or we can listen to it, but you got to understand how they're thinking to understand where they're trying to bring you so that you can, see if that's where you want to go or not. So for me, real estate, something that's going to provide like cash flow in some way, shape, or form, or businesses or cryptocurrency. And as I continue to expand the things that I'm doing, I will continue to add on additional passports, because then that gives you more flexibility of what you're able to do. And another benefit of expanding with other passports is that you can get around certain taxes potentially. I mean, there's 1,000 variables here, so don't just think this is like, but there are ways to do this. Even if you're making less than $120,000 a year, there's something called a foreign earned income tax exclusion. And you can basically live outside of the United States for 11 months of the year and at the same time pay 0 federal and state income tax. So think about this for a second. You're making $120,000. Let's just say you pay 30% of that, right? So you pay like $35,000 in taxes. $35,000 in taxes. $35,000 in taxes on your money that you're working for that is just fake. And you're paying 30% of your earned income by living 11 months of the year outside of the country. And remember, you can go outside of the country and say if your living cost here, your mortgage and or rent, food, transportation, etc. here, say it's $3,000 a month, say it's $5,000 a month, right? You're paying $5,000 a month to live here in the United States. You can go to a shitload of other countries and live on less than half of that and have a better lifestyle. Yeah, it is 100% possible. There's all sorts of beautiful places around the world where if you want to live on a beach and you want to pay less than what you're paying and pay that less in taxes, right? You can do that. And that extra $35,000 a year, $3,000 a month, $3,000 a month, you can take and you can put that into an investment that you believe in, right? An investment that, imagine putting $3,000 of extra money into an investment for your future. Right? Year one, you have 36,000, assuming the price of the thing you're investing in hasn't changed at all. Right? It adds up real quick. And that's assuming you don't get better and start making $240,000 a year later, which when you start doing your own thing is 100% possible. Now, we're going to wrap things up here shortly, but speaking of doing your own thing, one way that you can add income to go through and start putting that into investments that are going to help you in the future. And the number one investment is yourself. They can't take that away from you, right? Like your gold, they could take away from you. Your crypto, they could technically take away from you by putting you in jail, right? So you don't have that habit anymore or something like that. Houses, they can take away from you. Any other type of investment, they can take from you. Crypto, they can't really take it from you unless they get your seed phrase, but they can block you from having access by putting you in jail. But the one thing they can't take from you and that you can always use is by investing in yourself and your mind and changing your perspective and growing. So that's the number one investment there. I think crypto is a really great investment personally, right? If you invest into projects that you personally believe are valuable projects, right? Oops, I'm getting a phone call. And that. Sorry about that. I have it connected to my computer so that it is able to actually pull up here too. So if you want to make more income and you don't want to quit your job, and you don't even have to do anything for this. If you work a W-2 job, right? So here in the United States, that means you're getting a paycheck from a company that has hired you as an employee. You can get them to start paying you as a contractor, or you can start a separate company, right? And whether it's them as a contractor or you starting a separate company, that second company doesn't have to make any money and you can get more take home. So say in that example of $120,000 a year, and you have, say, $2,000 worth of expenses per month that you can pull into your business, right? So you're starting a business out and it's close to or related to something that you already do, right? Because a lot of times if you're going to do this, something that's close to what you're already doing, so you have expenses that you can put in there, assuming you don't have any income. This way it will still be beneficial to you. And you can pull expenses into here. So say throughout the whole year, you're making $120,000 a year. You're paying $36,000 a year in taxes. $2,000 per month, you're able to say pull into a business as an expense. So month one, you have $2,000 of expenses, but you don't have any income in your side business, right? Month two, $4,000 of expenses. And these are expenses that you would have already paid. These are expenses like your internet, your phone, your electric, your water bill, your rent in an office in your house, your gas for your car if you drive a gas car, potentially part of your payment for your car if you have a payment on your car. Those type of expenses that you already incur, that now a portion of those are related for business purposes, and you have $2,000 of that, right? So now you have $24,000 at the end of the year, right? These are expenses that you already would have paid. Now, if you go through, and we already said you're in a 30% tax bracket, effective or whatever, that's $7,200 extra you get. It's hard to grasp, right? Just like this video that we watch around inflation. It's hard to understand this the first time you get this. You don't understand what I'm saying because you got to go through and actually do it or educate yourself more. You have $24,000 of expenses in your year. That's going to reduce your taxable income. So instead of paying taxes on $120,000 of taxable income. You take, let's do the math, $120,000 minus $24,000, $96,000 times 0.3 is $28,800. That means you, instead of paying $35,000 in taxes, you're now paying $28,800 in taxes. So effectively, you're giving yourself $7,200 more of the money you earn. You trade your time and your energy for this fake made up money. You get $7,200 more of that, or $600 additional dollars a month. Just setting up a separate entity that doesn't make any effing fucking money. If you don't understand what I just talked about or what I just said, I've made multiple YouTube videos about this. I think everybody who works a W-2 job and wants to make more money should set up another business. Even if it doesn't make any money, you can make more money from your W-2 job by paying less in taxes, or see if they'll convert you to a contractor or something like that and still give you health benefits, right? If you care about the health benefits. Because you can make more money. You can take that extra $600, pay off any debt that you do have, and start investing into your future, right? Into yourself, into your own education, into assets that are going to go up in value that people are not going to be able to steal from you or take from you. Now, if you liked the episode, let me know over on Twitter. There's a link down below. If you enjoy these type of episodes, let me know down below in the comment section or over on Twitter, as well as GRC. He is linked down below. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you tomorrow, 11 a.m. EST.